Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Want to play a clip from the Peter Diamandis show, I think it's called Moonshots. Is that what the show's called? And they're talking about the singularity being here, right? So I just want to listen at some of their commentary. We'll talk a little bit about who these gentlemen are and talk a little bit about what the singularity is and what all this stuff means.
Feels like we're in the midst of continuous event horizons.
We all agree on this podcast that we're right in the middle of the singularity at this moment.
I think it's increasingly likely that the singularity is an optical illusion. It's an optical illusion that appears at a distance. It looks like a vertical asymptote, but when you're in the middle of it, as I increasingly suspect we are, feels quite continuous.
If you froze technology today and just assimilated what we invented in the last 2 years, it would take decades to realize all the implications.
GPT-5 Pro sets record at frontier math.
We now have clear line of sight to solving all of math, or substantially all of math as we understand it in 2025 now with AI.
How do we navigate this future? Because we can see it's coming now, so what does that future look like? And let's start painting that picture.
What does it mean when math is solved? What's the implications for all of our subscribers here? Now that's the moonshot.
Okay, the show is called Moonshots, and my familiarity with some of these gentlemen is their connection to people like Ray Kurzweil, being part of Singularity University, many of them being MIT graduates, so very smart, accomplished people, very wealthy people. Some of them are inventors and such, or in leading research, whether it be like biotech or whether it be robotics and so on, and all those very interesting topics and areas, right? So first, let's get the definition of the singularity, right? Let's get an official definition. All right, let me read some of what Wiki's saying about it, because there's so many definitions of the singularity. But the technological singularity, often called the singularity, is an event in which technological growth accelerates beyond human control, producing unpredictable changes in human civilization. According to the most popular version of the singularity hypotheses, J. Good's intelligence explosion model of 1965, an upgradable intelligent agent could eventually enter a positive feedback loop of successful self-improvement cycles. More intelligent generations would appear more and more rapidly, causing a rapid increase in intelligence that culminates in a powerful superintelligence, far surpassing human intelligence, right? So that's basic idea what it is. Let's take a look at what it might look like.
How far are we from robots that can understand and execute tasks just by listening to us?
Okay, I'd like to try something new. Even though this is the very first time that you've ever seen these items, I'd like you to use your new Helix AI and try to reason through where you think they belong in the scene, and then work together to put them away. Does that sound good?
A robotics company figure is pushing the boundaries of artificial intelligence with its new system, Helix. which allows humanoid robots to perform complex actions through simple voice commands. Unlike traditional robots that require specific programming for each task, Helix enables them to interact with new objects and situations without prior training. The system is powered by two artificial intelligence components working together. The first is a multimodal language model with 7 billion parameters that processes both speech and visual data at 7 to 9 Hz, acting as the robot's brain. The second component is an 80 million parameter artificial intelligence that translates these instructions into precise motor movements at 200 Hz. With this setup, Helix controls 35 degrees of freedom in real time, allowing for intricate motions from individual finger movements to full body coordination. Figure has demonstrated Helix's potential in various real-world scenarios. In one remarkable test, two robots worked together in a kitchen, organizing food inside a refrigerator without any prior exposure to those specific items.
All right, guys. So, speaking on the singularity as the idea of it already being here. So let's get into that. So we move in the what is known by some in the philosophical area as the permanent now, right? The forever now. And what that means is that, or ideally, from our point of view, it may appear, or the idea of the singularity, whereas it may appear like it's a point or is at a distant point in the future. It could be that it's not a point, but you're always kind of in it, right? As to say, we won't necessarily reach a point where it is the singularity. We're already in, some believe, a type of the singularity, right? And so let's get into that a little bit. Let's try to theorize on that a little bit. So the idea of the Turing test, right? If you don't know what the Turing test is, the Turing test was a test where a computer would be able to fool a human enough, right? That it is a person that they're engaging with, right? And if the computer could convince you that it was an actual person you're interacting with, then it would pass the Turing test, right? And so for years and years and years, people were predicting when that would happen, and they was like, "Oh, well, this computer hasn't even passed the Turing test yet, and it probably pass it in 2029 or 2030 or whatever," right? So that was a big deal, passing the Turing test, right? So the Turing test has been passed now. I'm like 99.9% sure it's been passed already. But interesting enough, passing the Turing test, or the idea that a machine is a human you're engaging with, like a computer could call you up on the telephone and you might thoroughly be convinced that you're talking with a person, right? And thus you could pass the Turing test in that way, and so on. But that was such a big deal, right? Where we can always tell that we were dealing with robots, and we'd be listening to this robot and so on. And they would have these mechanical voices, or they would pause when they spoke and whatnot. And so something would happen, you could tell. Well, now these language models are so sophisticated. They pause, some of them breathe and pant. I mean, to a person who, especially like a person who's speaks kind of has a monotone voice or personality, the kind of people I'm talking about. You'd probably be convinced that you're talking with a human being, right? And so that wasn't the Turing test was a big deal until it wasn't, right? Until we passed it, and then it seems like the goalpost keeps getting moved. So the idea that the singularity is not a point in time, right? But we're always been along the line of the singularity, especially after the Turing test has been passed, where you're convinced that the robots are humans. But not just that, but the understanding of these robotic systems um, to navigate their environment, like we're seeing here in this video with the Helix software, right? That's running these robots, right? Or the idea of embodied language model, chat GPT models, Gemini models, and so on. The interesting thing about it is, even when you speak in terms like super intelligence and ideas like that, uh, to the human being, right? Something like ChatGPT starts at an IQ point of about 140, right? So this thing is already would be technically smarter than a human. The idea of if the computer or a robot understands what it's doing, as opposed to following this program and doing whatever the code of the program is almost an irrelevant question. You might say, well, why is that an irrelevant question, right? To put in super intelligence and certain artificial intelligence and stuff like that. Why do I say that's a irrelevant question? It is kind of, in a way, because even when you're dealing with another human being, and the concept of the human being really understanding you, or just seeming like they understand you, the reality of the situation is you're all you're always going to feel like they understand you. You're never going to know if they understand you, right? It's like you're never going to know that uh, on the level of the mental landscape, if they're ever processing information the same way as you, right? So let's scale that up a little bit. Let's say, like, it takes a certain type of mental process to be a human, right? You have to understand a certain thing. You have to act and engage with that certain thing in your certain environment a certain way. But when humans don't do that, right? Where's the point? Where's the line that divides where you cross over that line to humanity, right? Uh, or is it more like we're all pretending it's an imaginary line and we're pretending to get there? Or is it just we're acting in a series of processes, right? Uh, the reason I say it's irrelevant because either way you will never know, right? And it's kind of mind-boggling, but you'll never really know the experience of another person, right? And so much like the robot that just has you convinced that it its characteristics are very much like human, right? To the point that your mind kind of perceives them that way, then you're always going to be on a scale like that, right? And as the robots, they get further along that scale, and they get almost unidentical to humans, right? Or identical to humans. Isn't it going to be kind of like the same thing, right? Because it's kind of like the same thing like the Turing test. Like, you just got off the phone with a robot that called your phone. You got off that phone convinced that you just spoke with a human. And I guess this example will be better, right? To help along with this video.
We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now. Okay, we have a 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's her first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks. Great. Have a great day. Bye.
So that was this is a very old video. This video is almost a decade old, actually, believe it or not. But in those two conversations, right, that telephone call, the one of those voices was coming from a robot, and the other was coming from an actual human being. the actual human being exits that phone call and is totally unaware that they're speaking to a robot. They're convinced that's a human being they just got the phone with, right? So at that point, did it even matter that they were talking to a human or not? Not to them. The experience was the same for them, right? And I think that's the point when we with the idea of the singularity, right? All these things working in conjunction together. The belief that you're dealing with another human consciousness, the performance and the task that these things are able to do. When you look at the average human being, right, who works a job, and probably 90% of these jobs are repetitive tasks, right? And these robots, like the robot you just seen earlier, these robots are basically now employed by BMW. They're already at work in BMW factories. And as you can see by some of the presentations, they're able to distinguish between certain objects in a kitchen, where to put them. They knew what belonged in the refrigerator. So they have some type of sophisticated reasoning skills, right? Obviously, they're able to see the objects and identify what the objects are, right? Now, whether you whether you have the experience of the components that allow them to do that is not done by a human agent or not, from your observation, it doesn't even really matter, right? If you understand where I'm getting at, right? That's not going to have an impact on stopping that particular robot how to do human jobs, how to navigate human environments, how to reason with humans, and how to have conversations with humans. So it's going to be an identical parallel on everything humans do to one another that these machines can do between human and machine. The only thing that will differentiate is the philosophical idea between the robot not being human. The experience and what you experience will be no different, right? And the reason we know that to be a fact is just like the woman who exited the phone conversation. In her mind, she just exited the phone conversation with a human being, had that robot made a joke, and she laughed at the joke and it made her day better. She would have just felt like another human being made her life better, her day better. And it would have been the same thing if she spoke with a human on the phone, right? So the so the singularity, I believe, is a conjunction of all these things working together. As far as the intelligence part, these robots are already processing and are some of them are able to act on that processing power and information on their own through a series of programs, much like a human would. But with that knowledge base, they're able to act with an information base much more vaster than a human beings, which obviously would make them more performative, more intelligent, right? If you follow what I'm saying. So that's just a way of saying that it almost doesn't matter that they know what they're doing or not. The fact that the programming allows them to know is what's the factor. It's almost like trying to understand how your brain works and why you do the things you do. And so even the idea that the singularity being about these robots being a vast degree smarter than you, they already are smarter than you. They already can do many of your jobs better than you. And I think there's a large denial about not only the singularity being here, but there's a large denial about uh, these robots not being able to do the things humans do, right? There was a popular documentary about automation, and it was done many years ago. But you had truck drivers who, they didn't think their jobs would ever be they would ever be able to be replaced. Like they didn't think truck drivers could be replaced. And so we do a similar thing today. And unfortunately, when in the documentary speaking to these truck drivers, the very unfortunate part was that the knowledge that the truck drivers had in the subject of could they be replaced was all uh, based on a feeling, right? Like they didn't work in robotics, they didn't work in artificial intelligence, and they weren't aware of any of these things that these robots and AI could do, many of them. But they just had this feeling that it would be something that would not be possible. Now, of course, today we know that it is very possible, and it's only regulations that stop it from, really happening, and that there are convoys of remote trucks and various things, and where at the very least you're not going to need all these truck drivers, right? And that example goes across the board with many areas of work. And so obviously these are responses and uh, views with a great degree lack of knowledge. The other issue is people who do work in the programming field in the computer um, software area, or they know something about it, um, and they're skeptical of some of the things, or they're calling what they're seeing in ChatGPT and a variety of things parlor tricks, right? That, this isn't really AI, and so on, right? And I think, whereas some of that, what they're saying at this stage and what we're aware of, as far as certain jobs that are performed, a certain degree of that could be true, but it doesn't negate the fact that most jobs are repetitive jobs, right? Most jobs aren't highly technical jobs, right? So even in that case, even if you want to say it's a lot of it is a parlor trick, that's still not going to stop a majority of more intelligent robots from being able to do jobs of people that are repetitive and jobs that most average people do, right? Because most average people you talk with, they aren't working in computer software, they aren't working in highly technical jobs, and so on, right? Because of the cost to get the education to do these jobs and a variety of things, it just may not be accessible to certain people. So these are all just ways of saying that the effect of what we're calling a singularity, even if you want to say we're not in a singularity, but the effect of it is very similar to that of what a singularity would be, which would mean robots pretty much doing all of the tasks, performative tasks that a human can do. The other thing is people will look at these various robots and they will go, hey, well, yeah, okay, that's great and all, but look how slow these robots move, right? And they need more, their batteries, they have to, what are they going to do? They have to be powered, right? They're going to run out of power and so on. Well, it may be true that these robots are slow in some of these tasks and some of the things they do, slower than a human. That's true. But if you look at stories like the tortoise and the hare, you'll find that turtle still won that race because of its consistency, right? Remember, these robots also aren't getting tired. And, when you're going, I need to take a lunch break or knock off for work. Now these robots are still working through. Not only that, but a lot of these robots, or they've created these robots that can change out their own batteries, right? So they can just go swap out their batteries before they run out and put their battery in their back. And they're literally doing that, right? I've watched several videos where these robots change out their own batteries. I guess the bottom line is when you look at the interaction levels of these robots today, to the point they're doing things that are on the level and on the scale of what a human can do, that are able to convince a human that they are a human, which we've seen evidence of and proof of several dozen times. When you can hold a better conversation with your chat GPT assistant than your fellow human being, then you know that you're definitely observing the effects of the singularity, right? Of course, projects like I run BitcoinMYK, which deals with universal basic income and what it means, for humans, right? Where they fit in a world like that, where they're no longer the top predator on the planet, right? Now they're under this humanoid robot and so on. They're under this intelligence of this artificial intelligence, right? How do you feed these people, and how do you how do they find a new purpose and meaning, in their world that they now occupy? And of course, I think that just is a testament to the seriousness of projects like we're engaged in Bitcoin MYK. So for a lot of you guys who watch the channel and wonder what Bitcoin MYK is all about, videos like this is what Bitcoin MYK is all about. It's all about combining the social with the economical in a distribution system that's going to allow you to basically navigate your new environment in a healthy way, that's going to be solution based to deal with the singularity. Because also, a very important part of the definition that when I was reading the singularity definition earlier, was the unpredictability of the cause of these robots being so much more intelligent and having so much more access to the human world, right? And that unpredictability, what it means. Because when you use unpredictability is also another word for unpreparedness or not being prepared. And so something like Bitcoin MYK meant to be solution-based to deal with a lot of that being unprepared. The problem with when I'm having conversations with people, and I don't want to say tech people, because a lot of these people I meet online who, say things like ChatGPT is a parlor trick, or this stuff isn't really as sophisticated as it is. A lot of these people aren't credentialed, and I don't want to go appealing to authority, and things like that. I would think that, let's give the example of a car mechanic. Let's say if you're driving your car and you run into 4 or 5 car mechanics in a day, and your car is giving off a strange noise, and the car mechanics will say, what, that could be your transmission. And I'm a mechanic, and that probably your transmission's going bad and so on, right? And then you run to several other people who aren't mechanics, and they're telling you, it's just a bad tire or something like that, right? The issue is, guys, is when we see people like at the beginning of this video, very accomplished, intelligent people, and they kind of go along this narrative, and their research and findings are pointing them in the same direction, and they're telling us what we're going to need. That we're going to need universal basic income. We are in a technological singularity. We're building this smart robot, and they show us videos of these smart robots doing the exact things they say. At some point, don't we have to take all that as a serious consideration? And if you're not working in those areas of research, right? How would you know? How would you know that their findings are so off? Especially when many of them have a large history of being accurate on predictions, right? On the curve, as many of them like to speak of. And so, at some point, I think there does need to be maybe an appeal to authority. Yeah, in some cases, because you wouldn't go to your doctor and be up there talking about, well, yeah, I just don't believe this. You could do that, but it probably wouldn't be the best thing for your health. right? Long term. So the singularity is here. I believe it. I believe it from what I'm seeing with these language models, testing them, and really going to the important part of them. And the important part being that if this thing acts exactly like a human, it can do exactly what a human does. And in some cases, you don't even know it's not a human. Well, is it gonna matter that it's not? Because uh, fundamentally, it's not going to be really much of a change unless you know, and unless you just fully know. And even if you fully know, that still doesn't really change anything outside just the philosophical thoughts, which aren't real necessarily, which are kind of, in a sense, imaginary, right? Your thoughts, as it were, because when they interact with the physical environment, especially if they aren't doing anything, but that robot's programming is, then is that really going to be as important as the idea you put on it, right? So just some interesting stream of consciousness thoughts out there, but I think some of you understand where I'm coming from with that. All that said, uh, robots get to a point they do all of the things that a human can do, to the point they replace humans, much like the Neanderthals got replaced and Homo erectus got replaced by Homo sapien. If you want to put the science in there, then humans are going to go extinct, much like Homo erectus and Neanderthals, right? Isn't that where it comes from? And so there then will need to be in that, what was that term I used earlier, where when people don't know if something's coming up. And I just remember I got an appointment, so I got to wrap the video up. But that unpreparedness, right, is what we need to resolve. But anyway, guys, that's the video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel. And as always, take care of yourselves and each other.